Hey everyone! So it looks like things are finally starting to calm down with this whole China-US situation. And you know what? This is happening right when the entire market seems to have hit the reset button. I'm going to break down exactly what this means for us in just a second. But first, let's talk about what's been going down. So Trump came out and basically acknowledged what we all already knew. We're in a trade war with China. Not exactly shocking news, right? For the past week or so, we've been watching this tariff battle between the US and China just keep getting more intense. And then yesterday, China basically called out the US, saying they were causing unnecessary panic with all this rare earth controls drama. They suggested it might be market manipulation, or just trying to create chaos. Who knows, right? But here's the key thing. China said they're open to talks. Now listen, I've been saying this over and over again. These massive political tensions that everyone freaks out about, they're really not that big of a deal. I'm being totally honest here. It's mostly just noise. When I see stuff like this happening and the markets are losing their minds with these crazy sell-offs, I think the smart move is to just step back and breathe. If we start seeing some serious discounts, sure, we can buy the dip when we see a solid floor forming. Or maybe we buy in a little higher if the market's starting to bounce back and we're flipping those key levels. But here's what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't make impulsive moves or get all worried about it. Why? Because most of the negative price action we've been seeing lately is coming from liquidations. Speaking of liquidations, you might be thinking, hasn't the market learned its lesson by now? I mean, we just saw over $20 billion get liquidated in the past week. But nope, apparently not. We had $450 million liquidated from the crypto market in just 30 minutes on the 16th.
And then yesterday, or today, depending on when you're watching this, another $250 million got wiped out in just 60 minutes from the crypto market. Oh, and quick side note, gold just hit a new all-time high yesterday. If you want to ride the waves in both precious metals and crypto markets, you definitely want to keep an eye on that. But back to liquidations, we're seeing them constantly. This is just one of many posts about it. If you scroll through the updates from these tracking accounts, you'll see liquidations happening left and right. And all of this gets accelerated whenever we get big news about the China situation, or when Bitcoin takes a dive. Speaking of Bitcoin, did you guys catch what happened earlier? Bitcoin actually hit 105,000 and then dropped below it. We'll dive into that in just a bit. Looking at the crypto market today, we've got a few things turning green on the daily charts, but honestly, it's still pretty much a sea of red out there. When we zoom out to the weekly view, yeah, there are a few green spots, but again, mostly red. We've got H4 down 3.7%, XLM down 5.2%, and of course, XRP is still in the red too. Look, I need to be real with you guys. This isn't going to be one of those overnight success stories where everything just shoots up dramatically. That's not how this works. We're probably going to keep seeing those 3, 4, even 5% drops on the weekly charts until Bitcoin starts bouncing back. Right now, we've got XRP sitting at $2.33, Bitcoin hovering around that 106.7 thousand mark, and Ethereum chilling around $3,800. And honestly, there's no significant bounce happening anywhere. Like I mentioned, yeah, we've got a few altcoins turning green on the daily, but we're still sitting at some pretty serious lows on most of these coins. We haven't flipped any major levels yet, so most of these moves we're seeing, even on the weekly where there are some decent-sized movements, they're just bouncing off the absolute bottom. Now let me explain what I mean when I say the market has reset. What am I talking about when I say we just witnessed a major market reset? It all comes down to sentiment, guys. We now have people, and I'm talking about retail traders, actually betting on Bitcoin falling below 100,000. Can you believe that? According to Polymarket, the odds of Bitcoin dropping below 100,000 this month just hit 52%. That's insane. There's a 25% chance people think it'll go below 95,000 and a 10% chance it drops below 90,000. When you start seeing retail making bets like this, it tells us two things. First, retail is incredibly bearish right now. And second, most retail investors are still expecting much, much lower prices. And this is happening right when the Fear and Greed Index on CoinMarketCap just crashed to 25, the lowest we've seen since going all the way back to April. We're talking about nearly hitting those extreme fear levels that we saw at significant market bottoms. Bitcoin's own Fear and Greed Index, it dropped to 22, which is straight up extreme fear territory. This is exactly what I mean by a market reset. And here's an even better picture of what happened. According to Waters Above, just last week we were sitting pretty at 64, firmly in greed territory. Now we're in extreme fear. This completely flipped the entire market sentiment on its head. Plus, we got the RSI completely reset, which actually gives the market room to bounce back in a big way. So let's look at what Bitcoin's doing on the daily chart right now. I actually warned you guys yesterday that we'd most likely fill that 0.702 and 0.786 retracement zone if we lost that 108K level. Well, we lost it on Friday, basically today, and we closed right around 106.4K, smack dab in that blue zone I was talking about. Now here's the million-dollar question: have we hit the bottom? Because we did wick down a bit below it to about 103.6K. Look, nobody's going to have a 100% certain answer on whether we've bottomed or not. But if we have bottomed here, and let me clean up this chart by removing all the stuff that's no longer relevant since we lost all that support. If we look at this on the weekly time frame, we can see that massive retracement level and this weekly candle. So what are we watching for now? First thing, we need to flip those May highs. That means we need to get back above 109K. That would be a great start and would also flip that support zone from August and early September. What's next after that? Well, then we need to flip 112K. After we break through 112K, our next major target is that recent high wick you can see on the weekly chart. That's sitting at 116K. Once we clear that hurdle, we need to flip all that resistance that kept us from our previous all-time high, which is at 119.6K. And only after we flip all those levels can we start targeting those all-time high weekly closes. Now I know what you're thinking. That looks like a ton of work. And you're absolutely right. It is a lot of work. But this is exactly what happens when we get a massive sell-off like we just experienced. Our total drop on this chart is now sitting at 17.88%. This is actually a really solid sell-off, a healthy pullback that lines up perfectly with some of our recent ones. We had one that was around 14%, and the one from May going into summer was roughly 12%. So this aligns perfectly with those strong pullbacks, which actually sets us up for a much stronger bounce. Again, I don't think Bitcoin is anywhere near topped out or anything like that. Let's talk RSI for a second. On the weekly, we're getting closer to those April and March lows from this year, and that's when the market bottomed out. If we look at the 3-day chart, we're almost at those oversold levels where Bitcoin hit its most oversold point this year. And on the daily, we're sitting at around 35, which lined up perfectly with that April bottom. So are we bottomed out here? Well, we really need to see an impulse move and some serious momentum on Bitcoin. But I'd want to see some of these first key levels getting broken. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, when will I officially call a Bitcoin bottom? I'll call it after we flip that May high wick. At that point, we should be in a major reversal, we should start seeing momentum building, and we should be breaking through these levels on the chart. After that, we just watch for closes above those key resistance levels. Now, when it comes to XRP or really any specific altcoin, yeah, we're still going to see sell-offs. The main thing I'm watching for is just a solid floor to form on these charts, and for Bitcoin to bounce back hard enough to take us to some key highs and flip those important levels. For XRP specifically, I'm really watching that $2.70 level. Until we flip that, we're just going to keep chopping around. But here's the thing, it's not just crypto and Bitcoin seeing extreme fear. The S&P 500 also hit extreme fear territory. Even the Kabisi letter called it extreme fear. And you know what? This is not what you typically see before a market crash. The S&P 500 is trading just 2% away from its record high. That's a textbook sign of a bull market right there. When we think about sentiment across the board, we're seeing extreme fear everywhere. We've got retail betting on Bitcoin hitting those significant lows, and this is all happening right after we just witnessed a 17% collapse on Bitcoin. Looking at the S&P on the daily chart, we can see we hit that low point and had a nice little impulse move here. This is actually a great bounce. And think about this for a second. We're hitting extreme fear levels when we're literally just 1.5% away from all-time highs. Let me tell you something. I don't think I need to spell this out for you guys, but these charts don't hit extreme fear when we're about to see a market collapse. Actually, it's the complete opposite. We hit extreme fear right before we start seeing violent recoveries in these markets. We also see extreme fear right before things go absolutely crazy, and we get into what I like to call the most hated rally ever, because everyone's sitting on the sidelines, scared out of their minds. They're panicking, they're worried about what's coming next. And that's exactly why the Kabasi letter called this a textbook sign of a bull market. Here's how it works. Pullbacks become oversold quickly and upswings just grind higher and higher. You can see the same thing with this rapid shift and complete polarization of sentiment we're seeing in the current bull run. Because here's the thing, markets don't top on extreme fear. Markets don't top when people are panicking. Markets top on euphoric levels, and we haven't even come close to seeing euphoric levels hit this market yet. Now you might be thinking, wait, what about when Bitcoin hit 125,000? Even then, and I actually just talked about this in my recent video, 10 days ago we hit an all-time high, but you probably wouldn't believe it because all the comments were negative. At that time, Bitcoin was basically the only thing running. So when it comes to where this market goes next and whether we've actually bottomed, I'd argue that we probably have bottomed here. Especially with extreme fear being hit across the board and even the S&P showing extreme fear levels. We're just taking this one step at a time, but I really think this was an exaggerated move across all markets. Next week could look completely different, especially with the S&P starting to grind higher. We're also counting down the days to the next FOMC meeting, which is roughly 2 weeks away. When I look at everything that's happening, I feel like this is going to be one of those moments in crypto history that we look back on and say, it was so obvious we bottomed there. Everyone was panicking, everyone was worried and concerned, everyone was still trying to gamble the market and getting liquidated, which caused an even bigger collapse. But here's the kicker, if they had just stacked spot orders instead of gambling with leverage, they'd be looking at some serious profits right now. Alright guys, that's my take on everything that's happening. If you found this helpful, definitely smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you don't miss any updates.